Hello, it's Randi Rhodes. Here's a clip from our show, and go to randyrhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon.
I have a dream.
Change has come to America.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
Our unalienable right to life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness, those rights were stripped from college kids in Blacksburg and Santa Barbara and from high schoolers at Columbine and from first graders in Newtown. First graders. And from every family who never imagined that their loved one would be taken from our lives by a bullet from a gun. Every time I think about those kids, it gets me mad. And by the way, it happens on the streets of Chicago every day. So, all of us need to demand a Congress brave enough to stand up to the gun lobby's lies. All of us need to stand up and protect its citizens. All of us need to demand governors and legislators and businesses do their part to make our communities safer. We need the wide majority of responsible gun owners who grieve with us every time this happens and feel like your views are not being properly represented to join with us to demand something better.
You ready to do that? You ready to do that, gun owners? You ready to do that? You ready to say something, do something, write something, call someone? Are you ready? Because this happens every single day in this country. Every single day. 96 people die every single day in this country from gun violence or from, suicide by gun. And, every month we have some sort of school shooting. Every month. The numbers are sickening. The numbers are staggering. And let's just show you who this kid was, okay? Let's just talk about who he is, because he's still alive. He didn't take his own life. And that, will allow us to talk to him and try to understand, what can go wrong in someone's life to the point of such despair and such loneliness and such isolation and such, depravity. What can go wrong in a 19-year-old's life? Well, for starters, both his parents are dead. I hardly hear anybody talking about, what could cause this kid to do this, and without understanding of the many, many untethered people. And I don't mean mentally ill. I mean people who have lost their family ties, people whose parents are abusive, children whose parents are divorced, children who feel this sense of desperation, children who have tried to figure out a way to find, some sort of family unit, gangs, joining gangs, or in this kid's case, he became, a white supremacist. Honestly, he did. But the kid is a human being, and there are so many human beings in this country who are untethered. There are so many, just floating around. So here's his story, okay? His mother and father are adopted parents in the first place. Okay, he was adopted, and so was his younger brother. His father passed away a few years ago. His mother just died in November. Now, the kid, as you know, was expelled from school. So now he has no mother, no father, and he's expelled from school where he was bullied to begin with. and ends up joining a white supremacist organization that was affiliated with Charlottesville. There was a discussion forum that was uncovered last night on 4chan, a channel for which Mr. Nick Cruz, he's 19 years old, Nick Cruz, he's the one who's charged, and he has been charged today. So there was a discussion forum on 4chan, and Nick Cruz was a member, and the Anti-Defamation League called this 4chan group, they called the hotline associated with this, 4chan group, and they spoke to a member who identified himself as a guy named Jordan Jarab. Jordan Jarab is based in Tallahassee, and he is the leader of a group that's called the ROF. And they're a white supremacist group. And this Jarab, who is, the person who runs this ROF, which has been flagged by the Anti-Defamation League as being a hate group, is based in Tallahassee. And in 2016, this guy was arrested on charges of threatening a staffer in the office of Governor Rick Scott, who, by the way, is advocating for guns to be on the desks of our students in elementary school. So Rick Scott knows about this group, and Rick Scott knows about this 4chan group, and Rick Scott knows that these people were flagged by the Anti-Defamation League as being a white supremacist group. ROF stands for Republic of Florida, okay? And what they advocate for is a white ethno-nationalist state within the state of Florida, okay? And so this guy, Nick Cruz, was with the ROF. He had been brought up by another member. And when the ADL called Jarab, Jarab said that Cruz had participated in one or more Republic of Florida training exercises in Tallahassee. He carpooled with other ROF, Republic of Florida members from South Florida to the training camp in Tallahassee. They have members in North Florida. They have members here in South Florida. They are an alt-right white supremacist group that employs paramilitary concepts from the anti-government extremist militia movement. ROF describes itself as a, quote, white civil rights organization fighting for white identitarian politics, and it seeks to create a white ethno-state in Florida. Most of the members of this ridiculous group are very young, and the group itself is only a few years old. This man, Jarab, who was already arrested for threatening the son of the Florida governor, so that now you know that Rick Scott knows about this group, and so everything that you see and hear him say from now on the TV, dismiss it because he's lying. But they said, oh, well, we didn't order him to do anything. What do you mean order him? It's not in your power to order anything. You're a freaking Fruit Loop. And if the ADL is correct, then that would make it the second school shooting by a white supremacist in the past 2 months. In December, in Aztec, New Mexico, you may remember, people who listen to us in New Mexico, there was a guy named William Atchison. He went on a shooting spree in a high school in northwest New Mexico in a town called Aztec. He killed 2 students and then he killed himself. He was also a white supremacist. So here you have these people who float around our society who are adopted and may have had bullying episodes all throughout their school experience, whose fathers have passed away. Their adoptive fathers have passed away. And in November, this kid's mother passed away. And now this kid is looking for some family environment, somebody, some group that he can, plug into, where he can get praise, where he can get respect, where he can get love, where he can get admiration. And he wanders into this chat room on 4chan, and he becomes a member of this white supremacist group, and he actually attends their paramilitary training in northern Florida. Now, he's expelled from school on top of all this. Why? Apparently, he had a girlfriend. His girlfriend broke up with him for being abusive. What a surprise. And also, we saw his Instagram account yesterday. We showed you some of the photos from it. He was also legendarily, and very predictably doing very gruesome, painful killings of animals and photographing that for his Instagram account. And of course, we have no way of knowing. God help me if I play not even two bars, if I play two notes of a Don Henley song, okay, an algorithm on YouTube is going to know that I did it, and it's going to pull down my show. But you can post all kinds of hairy crap. You can post all kinds of photos of yourself looking through holographic gun sites, and you posing with guns and wearing gas masks and guns. And you could, say that you want to be a school shooter, and you could post that in somebody else's YouTube channel, and nobody can trace you. Nobody can track you. The FBI was alerted. The FBI knew about this kid. Okay, because a man in Mississippi who is like what I am, a content creator on YouTube. Okay, that's one of the platforms we use. We use about seven different platforms, but one of the platforms we use is YouTube. And this guy was, I don't know what his creations were. You know what mine are, but there was a guy in Mississippi who was what they call a YouTube creator, and he created content on YouTube. And one of the comments that was in response to whatever he was creating, I don't know because they pulled it down, was, I want to be a legendarily well-known school shooter. I want to be a school shooter. This is my profession. This is what I want to be when I grow up. And so this man in Mississippi literally called the FBI and sent them a screenshot of that comment, which was like really proactive. And I don't know what kind of content he produces, so I don't know why the reaction to what he's posting would be that. But he saw it, he thought that was a bridge too far even for him, and he reported it to the FBI, some guy in rural Mississippi. And so the FBI came, they talked to him, he showed them the actual comment on his particular YouTube channel, and they did nothing. They did absolutely nothing. Now they say they couldn't find him. I swear to God, it's the truth. It's the honest God. If I play a bar of music, this whole show will be taken down. These are the priorities that the algorithms are assigned to, troll the internet for. Even though we had an ASCAP license, we actually did it by the book. We actually paid for the privilege so that the artists would get paid, because I believe in that. But somehow they can't have an algorithm for violent white supremacist postings, or postings that pronounce I want to be a school shooter, or animal killings, or there's no algorithm for that. No. Okay, so this guy actually belongs to this group, which includes in their group activities paramilitary structures, paramilitary trainings. They even have uniforms. Members have camouflaged painted vehicles. The leader is Jordan Jereb, based in Tallahassee. They have members in South Florida. Chris Cedino, if anybody knows Chris Cedino here in South Florida, he is the leading figure of this ROF, Republic of Florida group, this white supremacist group here in South Florida. And they communicate with all these other white supremacist groups.
Clear for takeoff. Randi Rhodes Air Force. Air Force. RandiRhodes.com.
Hey everybody, it's Brett from the Randi Rhodes Show. Independent media is the future, and Randi's leading the way. And it's ironic, the more freedom she gained, the more expensive it got. It's crucial now, more than ever, to keep this show pure and free of corporate influence so Randi can tell the hard truths. The first step to change is an unbiased media, and for that, we need your help. So please, go to randyrhodes.com/support and subscribe, you bastards.
Gobble, gobble. It's time for more turkey. Oh, yeah. All natural turkey jerky from Herky Jerky. That has been a hit ever since they introduced it in late 2017, that turkey jerky, because it's got no nitrates, no artificial ingredients, no MSG, preservatives, and no fat. The turkey jerky is the perfect snack any time of day. And, oh my God, it's absolutely delicious. It's bite-sized pieces of fresh turkey. It's meat that tastes just like the oven-roasted bird that you had on Thanksgiving. It's got just the right amount of everything: salt, smoke, flavoring, and spices. It's unlike anything you've ever had, and they don't skimp. They're going to send you a 14-ounce bag that is going to keep you munching for a long time. Nothing like those wimpy 3-ounce gas station bags. And all this month, $6 off every bag of turkey jerky, and there is no promo code needed. So you get free shipping with 2 bags or more of anything you order in the Herky Jerky store, including Smokies, bacon, beef, buffalo, elk, and venison jerky and sticks. February is the perfect time. Stock up on all the delicious products from Herky Jerky, especially the scrumptious turkey jerky. Order it today at herkyjerky.com.
Hello, Progressive Voices tune-in listeners. I'm Casey Hobbs.
And I'm Shane Mason, and we're the hosts of Nurse Talk Radio.
Here's what we're talking about this week. Just explain to me for a minute. So the reports must show that there is great harm to the community,
yes,
both in the land and in people's health.
It's showing that in communities where this particular kind of gas extraction is happening, people have headaches and animals have been sick and kids are having nosebleeds and a wide array of other signs and symptoms. But the other thing that we need to note is that these chronic exposures are probably teeing them up for longer term chronic diseases and, perhaps diseases that we're going to see later on.
Unfortunately, then the people will be far into their illnesses and it'll be harder for them to get any good health care as a result of years of that.
Amanda Krantz is the founder and CEO of Doja.com, a website connecting patients and caregivers for the sole purpose of sharing gratitude.
The person you want to thank may not be coming in for the next couple shifts. Now, if you leave a paper card or leave cookies, you don't know if it got to the person that you wanted to thank.
So true, and oftentimes it doesn't, yeah.
Yeah, so now we wrote pre-written responses. Thank you so much for your kind words. It means the most to me. And patients can attach photos as well. And so, it was great to see how well you're doing now.
Yeah.
Those things mean so much to the patient, and it's still no HIPAA violation. Get on in 90 seconds, share your gratitude, be done. You might not think of thanking them until years later.
I've been in nursing a long time, and when I was 25, taking care of a gentleman who had had a heart attack, and on the 4th day I walk into his room and he says, I wanted to thank you. Mm-hmm. I got you flowers because you really turned around my thinking about male nurses. And I am standing there wearing earrings, and I said, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Check out our show at nursetalksite.com and listen every Saturday and Sunday right here on Progressive Voices.
All things Randy at randyrhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
How do we allow a gunman to come into our children's school? How do they get through security? What security is there? There's no metal detectors. The gunman, a crazy person, just walks right into the school, knocks down the window of my child's door, and starts shooting her, and killing her. President Trump, you say, what can you do? You can stop the guns from getting into these children's hands. Put metal detectors at every entrance to the schools. What can you do? You can do a lot. This is not fair to our families, that our children go to school and have to get killed. I just spent the last 2 hours putting the burial arrangements for my daughter's funeral, who's 14. President Trump, please do something. Do something. Action! We need it now! These kids need safety now!
Oh, God. Oh, God. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Her daughter was killed yesterday, 14 years old. and the president says, hug your kids. I want you to remember this, though. I don't know how many people are going to remember, but some will, that back in February of last year, it's almost been a year to the day, February 28th, last day of February, last year, President Trump signed a measure into law that rescinded the Obama-era rule that was aimed at blocking gun sales to certain mentally ill people. The GOP majority Senate passed the bill by 57 to 43, and the House sent it to the president, and the Obama administration policy would have required the Social Security Administration to report the records of some mentally ill beneficiaries. Remember, we went over this, people who were so compromised that they couldn't do their own paperwork, they couldn't do their own, applications for social, they needed help, because they were so mentally ill and they needed Social Security disability. And it would have just given those mentally ill beneficiaries of Social Security disability, just would have given their names to the FBI's National Instant Criminal Background Check System. It was just people who were deemed mentally incapable of managing their own financial affairs. And nothing would have happened to those people. They just would have had their names added to the background check, the criminal background check system. It was about 75,000 people that would have been affected by it. The NRA was strongly opposed to it. They actually defeated that small little proposal of Obama's. And they said if a specific individual is likely to be violent due to the nature of their mental illness, then the government should have to prove it. This rule was written in response to Sandy Hook in Newtown, when Adam Lanza shot 20 students, elementary school kids, dead, and also slaughtered 6 teachers. Obama promised.
I know there's not a parent in America who doesn't feel the same overwhelming grief that I do. The majority of those who died today were children. Beautiful little kids between the ages of 5 and 10 years old. Mm. They had their entire lives ahead of them. Birthdays, graduations, weddings, kids of their own. Among the fallen were also teachers, men and women who devoted their lives to helping our children fulfill their dreams. So our hearts are broken today for the parents and grandparents, sisters and brothers of these little children, and for the families of the adults who were lost. Our hearts are broken for the parents of the survivors as well. For as blessed as they are to have their children home tonight, they know that their children's innocence has been torn away from them too early, and there are no words that will ease their pain. As a country, we have been through this too many times. Whether it's an elementary school in Newton, or a shopping mall in Oregon, or a temple in Wisconsin, or a movie theater in Aurora, or a street corner in Chicago, these neighborhoods are our neighborhoods, and these children are our children. And we're going to have to come together and take meaningful action to prevent more tragedies like this, regardless of the politics. This evening, Michelle and I will do what I know every parent in America will do, which is hug our children a little tighter, and we'll tell them that we love them, and we'll remind each other how deeply we love one another. But there are families in Connecticut who cannot do that tonight, and they need all of us right now. In the hard days to come, that community needs us to be at our best as Americans, and I will do everything in my power as president to help.
Yeah, and you know what he's up against, or what he was up against, a Republican Congress by 2012, where the NRA was just pouring in millions and millions and millions of dollars. And most of those dollars, I mean, you do have Rob Portman getting $3 million from the NRA, who yesterday, tweeted his thoughts and prayers, right? Heartbreaking news out of Florida. Jane and I send our prayers to the school, the community, and the victims of this tragedy. Yeah, he sends thoughts and prayers. He should, send some legislation, but he can't because $3,061,941 from the NRA to make sure Americans buy more guns is his motivation not to do anything. And then you've got, Congressman Ken Buck. I'm devastated to hear about the tragedy in Florida. Praying today for the students and all those impacted. Yeah, he got $800,544 from the NRA. Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina. Tragic news out of Florida. Please keep the victims, their families, first responders, and the community in your thoughts and prayers. $4,418,012 actually motivates him not to do any damn thing about this. Senator Bill Cassidy, Republican of Louisiana, he's praying for students, teachers, and first responders caught up in the tragic shooting. $3 million from the NRA. Corey Gardner. I'm heartbroken for the students and family of those involved in this horrible tragedy. I'm praying for our first responders as they act swiftly to contain the situation. Yeah, he's got 3,879,064 reasons not to, introduce any legislation. Richard Burr, the Senate Intelligence Committee chairman, he's got 6,986,620 reasons not to do it. Roy Blunt, 4,551,146. Marco Rubio, our senator from Florida, who hasn't seen enough yet, right? Marco Rubio pretends he doesn't know that in the town that I live in Lake Worth, there was a middle school. These are kids, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, right? So 11, 12, and 13-year-olds. There was a mass shooting at Lake Worth Middle School. Marco Rubio's got 3,303,355 reasons to a million reasons to forget that happened. Joni Ernst, 3,124,273 NRA dollars. Todd Young, $2,896,732 million. Bill Cassidy, $2,861,004 million. And then that's only part of what the NRA does. Then the NRA turns around and takes its money and it spends $50 million in political advertisements on top of the direct contributions to these candidates, right? And they spend $50 million on the TV advocating for people that they like. And of course, the lion's share of that $50 million, $34.5 million of that 50 is spent against Democrats. They take $50 million worth of political advertising out, and more than half of it is directed against people who they don't like their positions on guns. They don't want to see background checks. They don't want to see people who are so mentally ill that they can't handle their own personal finances put into the criminal database or put into the criminal background check system. They don't want that. They don't want that. They would rather say, and our governor just sucks wads, man. And he's going to run against Bill Nelson, who is the Democratic senator from Florida currently. And I am no freaking fan of Bill Nelson. I do not like Bill Nelson. I have had a long history with Bill Nelson, and I swear to God, on my sister's grave, Bill Nelson, who denied helping my family when he had a chance to help my family as insurance commissioner, get her covered for physical therapy that she needed so she would not die in a wheelchair all hunched up and crippled from back surgery that required physical therapy after her breast cancer had spread to her bones and shattered her back. Bill Nelson did not and would not show up to call the insurance company and say my sister should have physical therapy, even though she was terminal. so that her last year of life wouldn't be lived in crippling agony. He didn't do it. And I have never forgiven him for it, and I never will. But if Rick Scott is his opponent, I will hold my freaking nose and vote again for Bill Nelson, who was as useless as tits on a bull. Because Rick Scott knows what's going on here, and he needs that NRA money to run against Bill Nelson. He wants that NRA money. He will suck ass to get that NRA money. And you know what? My story is 20 years old, but there are stories as fresh as Sandy Hook and as fresh as Benton, Kentucky. January 23rd, a 15-year-old killed his two fellow students, both also 15 at Marshall County High School in Western Kentucky with a pistol, wounded 14 others. Aztec, New Mexico, another white supremacist kid. I told you, William Atchison. This kid, oh, let me tell you something. This kid is going to get defended by Donald Trump before the day is out. This kid, okay, here, Daily Beast just came out with this article. I didn't have this when I started the show, so I'm just going to read it with you because I was just scanning through it during the break. But this has to do with this, the Anti-Defamation League is where I got the information about the ROF, this Republic of Florida, ridiculous white nationalist, alt-right bullcrap group, right? So the Daily Beast followed up on it, and this just came out. So I haven't read it. It just came out. Nicholas Cruz, the man accused of killing 17 people in Florida high school, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, was a member of a white separatist paramilitary proto-fascist organization. The Group told the Daily Beast. Cruz, 19, is accused of opening fire inside Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. Prior to the shooting, he trained with the Republic of Florida. The group's captain, Jordan Jarab said, as first reported by the Anti-Defamation League, that's where I got it. The ROF seeks to create a white ethno-state in Florida, according to its own website, a view that Cruz shared. Quote, I don't know precisely what he believes, Jarab said. I don't know. He knew full well he was joining a white separatist paramilitary proto-fascist organization. He seemed just like a normal, disenfranchised young white man. While no motive has been described by police, Jarab speculated that Cruz may have allegedly committed the massacre out of hatred for Jews or women. Quote, there's a very real sense of feminism being a cancer. That could have played into what he did. But we do have female members of the ROF. What are you, self-hating, female? What, the PMS is too much for you? My doll. It actually works. Old-fashioned, good. Jarab said, adding, we're not a big fan of Jews. I think there were a lot of Jews at the school that might have been messing with him. Jarab said Cruz belonged to an ROF cell from Clearwater and drove up with members to Tallahassee to do paramilitary training. ROF was recently operating in Tallahassee and attempting to court new members, according to a local news report from last year. This group posts videos of training montages on the internet with members in fatigues brandishing weapons. But don't play any Don Henley, they'll flag you. Quote, I'm not trying to glorify it, but he was pretty efficient in what he did, Jarab said. He probably used that training to do what he did yesterday. Nobody I know told him to do that. He just freaked out. He freaked out like you freaked out. Cruz received at least one of his guns through the white supremacist group. Quote, I think somebody bought him a Mosin Nagant, but that's bolt action. He had a semi-automatic in the school, Jarab said. 6 classmates of Cruz told the Daily Beast he expressed extreme political views and disturbing behavior when he attended the high school he is now accused of attacking with a high-powered rifle. Quote, the one person I would expect to do it did it, said Julian Savan, an 18-year-old graduate who said she sat next to Cruz in English class last year, adding, he loved talking about his guns. He just didn't seem right, but he didn't seem like he would do something this big. Camry Bazal, 19, said she also sat next to Cruz and was at the pool in a nearby park when a friend at the high school called and asked her to come get them. Quote, somebody should have stopped him, Bazal said, especially on social media. The guns that were posted, it's scary. Can we urge these white supremacist gun owners to post alongside of Don Henley music on the YouTube? Because they'll flag it. Tomorrow, Sona, 19, went to an alternative school with Cruz last year. When the shooting began, he started receiving frantic texts and Snapchat messages from friends at Douglas. When Osana got to the school, she said gunshots were still in the air. Quote, he always seemed off. He always talked about guns and stuff like that, but I would never take it serious like that, Osana told the Daily Beast. In hindsight, she says it seems apparent that Cruz was a threat. 2 other classmates said Cruz wore a Make America Great Again hat. Quote, I saw him wear a Trump hat, said Sebastian Gonzalez, a 19-year-old who graduated from the high school in 2017. At our school, you were sort of with Trump or really against Trump. These are the new gangs. Ocean Parodi, a 17-year-old junior, said that he also saw Cruz wearing the hat. Quote, he always wore like really patriotic shirts that seemed really extreme, like hating on the Islamic religion. For example, he would say things such as like he would degrade Islamic people as terrorists and bombers. He wears a Trump hat, Parody said. Nyla Hussein, a 16-year-old junior, said her good friend sat next to Cruz in biology class last year and that he would regularly show her photos of dead animals. Quote, whoever he sat next to in class, he would show pictures of animals that he hunted. Cruz wore a Trump hat in the photo that his profile picture on Instagram about the company that said belonged to him. Over his face, he wore a red, white, and blue bandana on that account. In another one, Cruz posted photos of guns, knives, anti-Muslim slurs, and a picture of a toad he killed. On YouTube, a person by the same name spewed hateful commentary about anti-fascists. He also celebrated Elliot Rodger, the gunman who killed 7 people at the University of California, Santa Barbara in 2014, and who is considered a hero of the fringe men's rights movement. Elliot Rodger will not be forgotten, he commented on one video years ago. Cruz also commented on a CNN video called, Is Our Culture to Blame for Elliot Rodger's Rants? The FBI said it received a warning from a YouTube user.
To speak to Randi, call now, you bastards. 561-270-3844.
Hello.
The Randi Rhodes Air Force.
Hey guys, it's Scotty, Randi's producer here, and as many of you know, I grew up in Randi's house. You know, eating her food, watching her TV, and like most kids, ignorantly not following her advice. And one of her biggest pieces of advice was, never take a job in radio, because the big companies that run radio, they suck. Well, I didn't listen and ended up working in radio, and as always, Randi was right, they sucked. But I'm here now, and I can tell you that it takes a lot of chutzpah to break away from the big companies and start your own show. But you know what else it takes? Your support. We are independent media, so the only financial backers we have are you, the best listeners in the world. And we can't do it without you. So please, go to RandiRhodes.com and support the show, buy a stinking podcast, donate some money, and keep us going.
Whether you're listening to me, Mark Levine, each Monday and Wednesday,
or me, Leslie Marshall, each Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday,
you can hear us 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time on the Progressive Voices Network.
Here's a sample of what you'll hear. David K. Johnston is our guest. His new book called It's Even Worse Than You Think, What the Trump Administration is Doing to America.
One of Donald's best skills, and he has lots of skills, is to figure out how to get you to look at and pay attention to something totally unrelated so you're not thinking about what he is concerned you might think about. The team he brought in have loosed what I call political termites into the structure of the government. These termites are busy destroying the capacity of the government to do its work. And they're doing this in every federal agency. He and his administration are there to provide a government of the rich, by the rich, for the rich, and arguably of, by, and for the billionaires.
Let's talk about the destruction from within.
The people that were put in the Department of Environmental Protection, that agency now is turning into, letting polluters run free. So we have a lot fewer deaths and sicknesses in this country because Richard Nixon signed the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act, which contains the word shall. The government shall enforce that law. Well, they're not enforcing it, and they're helping the polluters. Trump's first budget proposed cutting for many disabled veterans their benefits when they get to retirement age from $35,000 a year to $13,000. Now, that's been stopped, but considering that Trump said, I love the veterans, we're going to take care of the veterans, nobody took care of the veterans, but I will take care of the veterans, that shows you what a fraud that is. At the Education Department, where the utterly unqualified and incompetent Betsy DeVos, the billionaire heiress from Michigan, was made education secretary, they have to deal with the student loan problem, which is largely people who went to these commercial schools that charge far more than community colleges and give far less education. And her department has taken the side of the bankers against the students because who did she bring in to address the student loan problem? Well, she brought in the predatory lenders. This is not the fox guarding the henhouse, Leslie. This is telling the fox, redesign the henhouse to make sure that you dine really well on chicken.
And this is somebody who I saw today has completely blocked complaints of all teachers in the public school system nationwide. It's sort of like if you can't make your complaint known to the boss, what good is somebody heading up the United States Department of Education?
They are not there to drain the swamp. They are the swamp monsters.
Again, that's Mark Levine every Monday and Wednesday.
And Leslie Marshall each Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday.
3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time on the Progressive Voices Network.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844.
561-270-3844. Don, we are a broken nation tonight on the issue of guns, and the American people are begging for leadership. There is a lot that perhaps is unknown politically, but let's be brutally honest about what we do know, and I say this as a Republican. Republicans will never do anything on gun control. Consider last summer you had Republican members of Congress shot and nearly killed during a softball practice, and they did nothing. After the Pulse nightclub, Democrats had a sit-in in the House. Republicans did nothing. After Vegas, hundreds injured, over 50 killed. Republicans did nothing. The idea of gun policy in the Republican Party is to try to get a speaking slot at the NRA and prove to that constituency that you're further right than generations past of Republicans have been on guns. And there's a disconnect with the American people and the heartbreak of the American people tonight. And so if this is the issue that defines your ideology as a voter, there are two things I would suggest tonight. First, flip the House. Flip the House. Republicans are not going to do a single thing after this shooting we saw today. But I would also offer to Democrats, work for incremental wins. And what I mean by that is this. We can do comprehensive universal background checks, and we can do it with the support of the law enforcement community, which typically is a conservative Second Amendment group. The law enforcement community wants universal background checks. They want greater restrictions on assault rifles. Democrats should go to the law enforcement community and say, we're going to leave the Republicans behind. Let's work on this together right now and get the will of the American people to be enacted in the United States Congress.
That's David Jolly. He used to be a congressman from Florida, but they booted him out over the gun issue. Seriously. They thought that, he had introduced some hardcore gun legislation, David Jolly, and he'll admit that he did. But when you couldn't even get, you remember Saeed Farouk and Tashfeen Malik? Okay, that was the San Bernardino killers, and they were on the FBI's terror watch list. And when the when there was a move to try and get some legislation that simply said, if you're on the FBI's terror watch list, you shouldn't be able to pass a gun background check in this country. Anybody that was for that was targeted by the NRA as being 4 background checks, that the slippery slope, you start checking people on the terror watch list, then you start adding mentally ill people, to the terror, to the background check. They actually campaigned against David Jolly and threw him out of Congress. He told this story this morning to remind us why he's not in Congress anymore.
Look, I've been in Republican politics for over 20 years and had an opportunity to work in the Congress as staff, serve as a member of Congress. And the reality after each shooting, if we are brutally honest, is Republicans are not going to do a single thing. And so if you're an American that this is the center of your political ideology, gun issues, then you need the Democratic Party to be in charge and to address reasonable and responsible gun control. Republicans will not do it. And Chris, I would also point out, though, because there is this thing about former members often speaking out. I tried to lead in the House on the terror watch list. I offered a compromise that had due process that Ted Deutsch was talking about. I was the only Republican to sponsor universal background checks. And you know what happened? I received NRA support in my very first race before I had cast a single vote. Once they started seeing my votes and once they saw the bills I introduced, they abandoned me. And much of my leadership did as well.
There you have it. That's what happens if you are for background checks, or if you say, hey, well, a 19-year-old who's not in the military, which is, a well-regulated militia, but a 19-year-old who's just, not even able to buy a beer. A 19-year-old who didn't qualify. He wanted to join the service, this guy. He was desperate to find someplace to fit in, and so he found his fit with the white nationalist, ethno-nationalist, freaking pro-Trump movement. Yeah, but otherwise he wanted to join the military. He was part of the ROTC at school, etc., right? If you are for comprehensive background checks, or if you say that if you have to be 21 to buy a beer, then you ought to be 21 to have to buy a gun, the NRA will target you. The leadership of the House will join in the NRA's targeting of you, and you will no longer be able to cast a vote for anything because you'll be removed from Congress. That is what the NRA's message is to these legislators, and they back it up with millions and millions and millions of dollars. And now we're finding out that the NRA's been infiltrated by Russia. This guy, Alexander Torshin, who is a lifelong NRA member, but is also a Russian mobster, infiltrates these conservative groups. And what's really interesting is in Vladimir Putin's Russia, which we are becoming more and more like, you can't have a gun. So be careful what you wish for, Trump freaks, lunatics. Robert in Naples.
Hey, Andy, I apologize. I'm on the highway driving my truck. I just want to say real quick, real fast. I heard, and I'm hoping someone can confirm whether or not Pam Bondi or whatever else she is in Florida, did she offer to pay for the funerals for these children?
The state of Florida is paying for the funerals.
Okay, my question to you is, did we pay for the funerals of Orlando, or did we pay for the funerals for anybody in Florida that was killed by a stray bullet?
I don't know.
Well, I'd like to know that. I'm not giving you.
Why? Why is that important?
Well, it's important because I think it's political. I think they're trying to make our governor, Skeletor, look like a fucking human being, and he's not.
Oh, he's not. No, he's not. Listen, we have a governor in the state of Florida who was convicted of the largest Medicare fraud in the history of the universe, in the world. And he elevated himself to governor, and 2 times this stupid state voted for him, and now he's going to try and get into the Senate.
Yeah, I don't think the state voted for him. I think they've been rigging our election for years. I really believe ever since Al Gore, I don't think there's been an honest election in Florida ever. I mean, Obama won because millions of people showed up. That's how we win here. We got to show up.
That's how we win, yes. When it's very close, the Supreme Court, as we know, will decide Florida. But when it's not close, you can't really steal an election all that well.
Listen, Randy, I love you, too, but I'm driving in the wrong
all right.
direction. We gotta go.
Be careful. Robert in Atlanta.
Hi, Randy. I wanted to, mention, I think they should maybe have an investigation into the NRA, and let's ask Mr. LaPierre how much money he has received from the Russians.
Yeah.
And then do like the Republicans on Fox News, beat that drum until they can't stand it anymore. Every time anybody defended guns,
let's go ahead and ask them if they're getting supported by Russians and how much money they got.
Yeah. It's a great road to go down to do a real investigation of the NRA. I just don't know how, it would happen without Mueller. You know what I mean? Without the special prosecutor and investigating whether or not it is true, as was in the dossier, that the Russians infiltrated very conservative groups in this country, including the NRA. If that is found, if Mueller actually finds that that is true, then we get the investigation. And but without that, I don't know how you would, go about doing that.
Well, we might can do the Fox News approach. Just start banging on it constantly.
Well, the thing
Never
about
give them a break.
the thing about us is we employ journalistic standards. We don't just spread gossip, rumors, and opinion about things. And when we do, we say it's just an opinion. I mean, I've said it before, but honestly, I don't know how a private organization can have their books audited without a reason.
We can do the some people say type thing.
I know what you're driving at. Yeah, well, some people do say. And one of those people was under oath. And one of those people, his name was Glenn Simpson, under oath to the House Intelligence Committee, said that the NRA had been infiltrated by Alexander Torshin and a lot of Russian mobster money. So it would be an interesting, investigation to see if that holds water.
Well, I agree, but some of them, since we know that they all tend to live in the past anyway, when you start saying Russians, they're going to hear communist anyway, and they may just get off on that by looking for communists there too.
Yeah, well, I mean, the idea that, we are becoming more like Russia in our foreign policy, more like Russia in our attack on media, the only thing that's left is, for Trump to kill a journalist, because that's what Vlad does. But instead, he just, humiliates them and calls them liars and says everything, all their hard work and everything that they do to inform the American people about the heinous nature of this presidency and the chaos that is the White House and this saber rattling with North Korea and having no plan for this and allowing, hundreds of people to operate in the West Wing without security clearances. And, thank God for the press. Thank God for them. But he trashes them so that people get confused and disoriented and they don't know what to believe. That's, just one step away from killing a journalist, really.
Well, that's true, too.
So, yeah, he's got communist tendencies, or at least autocratic ones. Matt in Portland. Oh, and you know what? Before Matt in Portland, I just wanted to tell you. So one of the people who listens to the show last night emailed me and was talking about the infrastructure package and said, the privatization of, and the selling off of the public, the public airports and the public roads and bridges and all that. He said that's exactly what Vladimir Putin did. Privatized everything in Russia that the people owned, and then gave it to his favored friends, and that's how they became oligarchs. And then they were all indebted to Vlad, and so they did what Vlad wanted them to do: rigged elections and spent money on Vlad's hopes, dreams, and if they don't go along with Vlad, and Vlad either takes all their money or has them removed from society, either jailed, or they get an injection of polonium, or they fall out the window moving their own bathtub. Well, the good old-fashioned car bomb is always fun. So, I mean, how much like Russia do you guys really want to be? Because we are looking more and more like an autocratic, oligarchical. I mean, it's still communism. It still is, except that they don't distribute. At least communism said, that they would distribute all the profits equally to the people. They never did. They skip that part all the time. They leave that out. But yeah, I mean, we're starting to look more and more like Vladimir Putin's Russia than we are like George Washington's America. Oh, and by the way, I watched CNN wrestle with who regulates the militia. I mean, what does that mean in the Don? The answer is the National Guard is the well-regulated militia. The National Guard is the state militia, and it protects from everything from foreign invaders to an overactive federalist, military coup. And the governor of each state is the commander-in-chief of the National Guard. That is a well-regulated militia. They meet, on once every week, once every month, and 2 weeks a year.
For a commercial-free, on-demand, whenever, wherever listening experience, visit RandiRhodes.com for your personal premium podcast today.
Now, the top of the hour on the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn presents the Green News Report.
I think there's assumptions made that because the climate is warming, that necessarily is a bad thing.
Assumptions made by U.S. intelligence agencies who contradict the Trump administration on climate risks.
The question is whether the public message that Exxon put out there to investors constituted fraud.
ExxonMobil countersues against climate change lawsuits. Broadcast news still failing to inform the public about the real-life impacts of climate change. Plus, the Queen of England has had it with single-use plastic waste.
All of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment. Today's snarky comment comes from commenter Joe, who writes in to say, I really wish you would just stick to the facts and drop the inane snarky comments. It's douchey. Okay, Joe. No snarky comments for anybody then. Thanks. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, we are coming up on the 9th anniversary of the Green News Report. So thanks to those of you who stopped by bradblog.com/donate to help us in our 10th year. But now, I guess, we're going to have to cut out the snarky comments, says
no, Well,
Joe.
I disagree.
That's what he says. It's douchey. Never douchey, however, are your reports. What do you have for us today, Des?
Well, U.S. intelligence agencies are openly defying the Trump administration's denial of climate change. You may remember that last week, EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt tried again to mislead the American public by sowing doubt about whether climate change is as dangerous as scientists warn that it is.
Is it an existential threat? Is it something that is unsustainable? So I think there's assumptions made that because the climate is warming, that necessarily is a bad thing.
Well, this week, the U.S. intelligence agencies, in their annual worldwide threat assessment, said it is unequivocally a bad thing, joining with federal science agencies in directly contradicting the Trump administration. The threat assessment unambiguously warns of the destabilizing influence of climate change, like extreme weather events that, quote, raise the risk of humanitarian disasters, conflict, water and food shortages, and population migration. Further, the assessment says that climate change is, quote, likely to fuel economic and social discontent and possibly upheaval through 2018.
Well, since when does the Trump administration listen to U.S. intelligence agencies? Is that too snarky?
I don't think so. The Trump administration this week also moved to repeal one of the last unchallenged Obama-era climate change regulations, a rule that required oil and gas companies to fix and capture methane leaks from drilling on public lands. Multiple outside analyses have found that, contrary to Trump's claims about deregulation, repealing the methane rule will not actually create any new jobs. It will actually reduce the natural gas supply from public lands because of leaks, and the public will lose out on royalties from all that wasted natural gas, as much as $23 million a year.
Yeah, but it will make the Republicans' fossil fuel donors very happy.
Speaking of Republican fossil fuel donors, ExxonMobil is turning the tables in court and is now suing the lawyers who are suing it over climate change. Exxon's countersuit claims that attorneys general, public officials, and environmental groups are conspiring against it. Exxon is targeting at least 30 people and organizations, including the attorneys general of New York, California, and Massachusetts, who are suing Exxon over allegations that it misled the public and its investors about climate change, despite knowing the risks of the use of fossil fuels.
Good luck with that, Exxon.
Well, critics do suggest that the gambit is intended to harass mayors and city attorneys into dropping their lawsuits. Media Matters says the broadcast news networks are reporting more on climate change, but still failing to educate the public about its real-life impact. The analysis of nightly nightly news shows and Sunday morning shows found that in all of 2017, a year of historic, deadly weather disasters, there was indeed more coverage of climate change. But corporate media outlets focused largely on Trump and his uninformed opinions, and they undercovered or ignored the administration's rollback of pollution standards and focused even less on climate science and the impacts of global warming on people, the economy, and national security.
Very douchey.
Finally, the Queen of England has had it with plastic waste. The UK's Telegraph reports that the monarch is believed to be behind an announcement this week that Buckingham Palace will phase out single-use plastics like plastic straws, bottles, and utensils from its public cafes and all royal properties, and will switch to compostable and biodegradable packaging for the royal family to do its part to reduce plastic waste in the ocean.
Long live the Queen. For much more on all of those reports and the ones we couldn't get to, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget you can download our reports anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes. Find us, follow us, and share us worldwide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Please help Progressive Voices support the Green News Report by stopping by bradblog.com/donate.
It's titled Forgetting the Forgotten, 101 Ways Donald Trump Has Betrayed the Middle Class. And it drives the stake of truth through the heart of his populist pretensions. Don't just read it. Use it like a Thomas Paine pamphlet to spread the truth. To download a free copy, go to corporatepresidency.org/forgotten.
Back live from New York City and the United Nations. Luke Vargas rejoins us with Talk Media News, foreign correspondent for Talk Media News. We have indictments that came down today. Luke, can you tell us about this? Because I've got some questions for you.
All right. Well, I mean, my big takeaway here is just to state at the outset that this is not related to the Russia-Trump collusion. There's nothing in this document that says, the Trump campaign was actively working with these trolls who are named many times in this indictment. Instead, what it paints a portrait of is a multi-year, very organized, very savvy social media influence campaign. It began in 2014. About 80 Russians were involved in total at this marketing firm in Russia, and they did their research. They looked into some of the most divisive issues in the United States. They created American aliases that sort of tapped into that, and they tried to become influencers within highly charged communities and, exploiting people who were incredibly partisan and very rabid about their beliefs. And it was only in, sort of late 2015, early 2016 when the decision was made to turn this campaign, which was originally just about sowing division in the United States, and direct it at the election. And Trump wasn't the first person they flocked to. Instead, it was mostly about disparaging other candidates. And only later in 2016, according to this indictment, was the decision made to basically bury everyone else and prop up both Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders.
Hey, Luke, if you're still with us, we've only got about 20 seconds. It sounds like Leslie just dropped out there, but we appreciate your analysis, and hope you have a great weekend.
Thanks so much.
Talk to you
guys
again soon. All right. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
That was Luke Vargas, live from the United Nations in New York City. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and I hope you have a great weekend. We'll talk with you again on Monday.
It's Thursday, February 15, 2018.
I think there's assumptions made that because the climate is warming, that necessarily is a bad thing.
Assumptions made by U.S. intelligence agencies who contradict the Trump administration on climate risks.
The question is whether the public message that Exxon put out there to investors constituted fraud.
ExxonMobil countersues against climate change lawsuits. broadcast news still failing to inform the public about the real-life impacts of climate change. Plus, the Queen of England has had it with single-use plastic waste.
All of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment. Today's snarky comment comes from commenter Joe, who writes in to say, I really wish you would just stick to the facts and drop the inane snarky comments. It's douchey. Okay, Joe. No snarky comments for anybody then. Thanks. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, we are coming up on the 9th anniversary of the Green News Report. So thanks to those of you who stopped by bradblog.com/donate to help us in our 10th year. But now, I guess, we're going to have to cut out the snarky comments, says
no,
Joe. Well,
I disagree.
That's what he says. It's douchey. Never douchey, however, are your reports. What do you have for us today, Des?
Well, U.S. intelligence agencies are openly defying the Trump administration's denial of climate change. You may remember that last week, EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt tried again to mislead the American.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
17 people are dead and 15 more injured after a 19-year-old opened fire on his former high school in Parkland, Florida. Armed with smoke bombs, the shooter reportedly wore a gas mask and pulled the fire alarms in order to lure students and teachers out of classrooms before unleashing a torrent of bullets with an AR-15. He was apprehended 2 hours later in a nearby neighborhood. Senator Chris Murphy represents Connecticut, the site of the Sandy Hook school shooting, speaking on the Senate floor Wednesday as the tragedy was unfolding.
This happens nowhere else other than the United States of America. This epidemic of mass slaughter, this scourge of school shooting after school shooting. It only happens here not because of coincidence, not because of bad luck, but as a consequence of our inaction. We are responsible for a level of mass atrocity that happens in this country with zero parallel anywhere else. As a parent, it scares me to death that this body doesn't take seriously the safety of my children. And it seems like a lot of parents in South Florida are going to be asking that same question later today.
But Florida Senator Marco Rubio, who's taken over $3 million from the NRA, thinks it's not the time to talk about guns.
Your colleagues in the Senate here from Washington, D.C. have already been trying to make this about policy and about gun control. Is this the appropriate time to be doing that?
It's not, only because people don't know how this happened. I mean, who this person is, what motivated them, how did they get a hold of the weapon that they used for this attack. I think it's important to know all of that before you jump to conclusions that there's some law that we could have passed that could have prevented it. And there may be, but shouldn't we at least know the facts? And so I think that you can always have that debate. But if you're going to have the debate about this particular incident, you should know the facts of that incident before you run out and prescribe some law that you claim could have prevented it. I've seen a lot of that on television, and maybe there is a law that could have prevented this instance. But we don't know that, and neither do they.
Melissa Falkowski, a teacher at Marjorie Stoneham Douglas High School, explained the training and procedures they followed, but said it's not nearly enough.
We talked to every single class period that sat in front of us, about what to do in this situation, in a bomb threat, in a fire drill. Like, we went over every safety, and every single teacher did that with every single, class that they had until the kids were tired of hearing about it. But they knew what to do, and we knew what to do. And even with that, we still have 17, casualties, 17 people that aren't going to return to their families. And to me, that's totally unacceptable. And from my personal viewpoint, it's time for Congress, government, somebody to do something, and it's time to talk about what the problem is and try to fix it.
I just think,
I've seen this on TV. We all have, this shooting after shooting, and, there's always the same thing is said, it's not the time to talk about gun control. It's not the time. It's time to pray for the families. And I just think that hasn't gotten us anywhere. I mean, here we are, and we're like the latest statistic on, on school violence. And as a society, as Americans, we're failing our children. We're not keeping them safe, and Congress is failing us, and the government is failing us, and something has to be done.
When asked if he's willing to take a stand on gun control in a press conference Wednesday night, Florida Governor Rick Scott showed he's not ready to do anything about it.
My heart goes out to everybody impacted today. All of us can internalize this if it would happen to their family. All of us want to have everybody live in a safe community. And there's a time to continue to have these conversations about how through law enforcement, how through mental illness funding, that we make sure people are safe, and we'll continue to do that.
Governor, what business does a 19-year-old have in having an AR-15? Specifically, just your thoughts.
Yeah, we're finding all the facts. There's a thorough investigation going on. The sheriff's department will release exactly what happened, how the individual got a gun, things like that. We'll learn those things, and then we can make it. We can determine in the future, how we continue to make this place safe.
Although the shooter had been reported to the FBI due to social media posts, and he had been expelled from the school he returned to on Wednesday, Broward County Sheriff Scott Israel told the public that speaking up would make a difference. Donald Trump took to Twitter, once again turning the blame toward mental illness and others instead of looking at guns. He tweeted Thursday morning, quote, "So many signs that the Florida shooter was mentally disturbed, even expelled from school for bad and erratic behavior. Neighbors and classmates knew he was a big problem. Must always report such instances to authorities again and again." Once again, the authorities were aware of the shooter, and he still cleared a background check, allowing him to purchase the AR-15 he used to kill 17 innocent people in his former high school. And that's a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener funded, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
Mary had a little lamb. The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe it. Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
And by the way, folks, just in case you're curious, no, Russia did not help me. Okay? Russia. I call it the Russian hoax. One of the great hoaxes. Actually, that's the thing I was thinking about. That's the thing that the Democrats did best. They lost the election, and they didn't know what happened. And they needed an excuse. So they said, Russia. And then they said, wait a minute, Russia. And Trump, honestly, it's the thing they did best. They did a rotten job of running. But to convince people about this hoax, that was probably the thing that they did best. But it is one great hoax. No, Russia did not help me. That I can tell you, okay? Any Russians in the audience? Are there any Russians in the audience, please? I don't see too many Russians. I didn't see too many Russians in Pennsylvania. I didn't see too many Russians.
Oh, see, now that is the problem for him, isn't it? Oh, it's Friday, you bastards. Very excited about this Friday. I was saying to Scotty on our morning phone call today that it's Friday, and I expect a Friday news dump, and I do expect somebody's going to get fired tonight. I'm not sure if it's going to be Chris Wray over at the FBI, and they'll blame it now on the fact that the FBI was tipped off by somebody in Parkland, somebody that knew this kid, Nick Cruz, and called into the FBI with very specific information about him, about his guns, about his social media posts, about that. So I don't know if they're going to use this as an excuse to fire Chris Wray. I suspect that Kelly's going to go. I don't know if they've, talked anybody into sacrificing their soul to go to work for the Trump administration in place of John Kelly. But I suspected this morning that it would be John Kelly. But then all of a sudden the news shifted, and it looks like maybe Chris Wray, at the behest of our governor here in Florida, one of the biggest Medicare fraudsters in the history of the universe, certainly in our country. Our governor, Rick Scott, is calling on Chris Wray to resign today because he missed, because the FBI didn't follow up on a tip. And that tip, obviously was very, very important because people were screaming and yelling about this kid being ready to do something, being armed and dangerous, being erratic, being on their radar, being somebody that they suspected would end up being a school shooter. So maybe Chris Wray tonight, maybe John Kelly tonight. But in the meantime, another story broke. And I feel bad for our kids in Parkland because they're going to take a back seat to this for a little while. I'm sure they will make it to the Sunday shows, though. I'm sure they will. And they'll make it on this show today because I want you to understand what happened to the Second Amendment, when it happened to the Second Amendment, and arm them with what you need to have when you're going to a gunfight. And it's called information, and it's very important that they get this. Anyway, Robert Mueller this morning, through Rod Rosenstein, indicted 13 Russian nationals and 3 Russian companies who obviously interfered in the U.S. election and used everything and every source and method that they could to influence the U.S. electoral process favoring one Donald Trump. They wanted to infect the United States and the electoral process because they favored Donald Trump. That is the conspiracy that Robert Mueller was able to show today. That was the conspiracy he was able to indict on. The indictment clearly calls this a conspiracy. Now, why are these words important? These words are important because now that Robert Mueller has proven the underlying crime, which Trump has denied repeatedly and refuses to protect and defend us against, the crime that is ongoing. It's ongoing. We just heard testimony the other day from all the intelligence agencies saying America is under attack. Yes, it's ongoing. Did the president instruct you to do anything specific to stop the threat? No, but we're doing it anyway. Right? So we have all that. So you have the president refusing to act against a organized criminal conspiracy to infect and to interfere in U.S. elections. And it is ongoing, and that is what this says. It says it started in 20... I'll read you the exact quote from the indictment. It says, from in or around 2014 to the present. Do I have to keep going? No, I really don't, because that is the conspiracy. He said from in or around 2014 to the present, defendants, which are these 13 Russian nationals, who, by the way, were hackers. That's who they are. And some of them were organizers of hackers. Some of them, and they were so organized. This conspiracy was well conceived. The conspiracy included visits to the United States, posing as, organizations, doing research on right-wing groups, bonding with these right-wing groups, secured borders was one, woke Americans was another one, to suppress the vote for Hillary. All these things happen. But anyway, from in or around 2014 to the present, defendants knowingly and intentionally conspired, hence a conspiracy, with each other and with persons, and this is important, and with persons known and unknown to the grand jury, which means people who have been brought in front of Mueller's grand jury and some who haven't been brought in front of Mueller's grand jury, which could be anybody who's not been brought in front of the grand jury for questioning. Could be Donald Trump himself, couldn't it? People who are known to the grand jury, meaning it wasn't these Russian nationals who are known to the grand jury, all right, because they weren't here. They're not here. They're in Russia. and we are going to seek extradition and blah, blah, and Russia will say no. But the reason why this is important is because it is a conspiracy. So here's what I found the most telling is this little section here, and I can go through some of the other things that the media thought was, the regular media thought was interesting, but this is what really stuck out to me. And if you're following along, the indictment is, this is page 1 at the very bottom in section 2. From in or around 2014 to the present, defendants knowingly and intentionally conspired with each other and with persons known and unknown to the grand jury to defraud the United States by impairing, obstructing, and defeating the lawful functions of the government through fraud and deceit for the purpose of interfering with the U.S. political and electoral processes, including the presidential election of 2016. So it goes on to say that they chose Donald Trump, that they supported Donald Trump, that the Russian government was in support, and that they were funneling money to these hackers, and that these groups and these Facebook pages and these Twitter accounts were all designed to, and I'm quoting, attract U.S. audiences. These groups and pages which address divisive U.S. political and social issues falsely claimed to be controlled by U.S. activists when in fact they were controlled by the defendants, which is the Russians. Defendants also used stolen identities of real U.S. persons to post on organizations-controlled social media accounts. Over time, these social media accounts became defendants' means to reach significant numbers of Americans for purposes of interfering with the U.S. political system, including the presidential election of 2016. Defendant organization had a strategic goal to sow discord in the U.S. political system, i.e., elections are rigged. It's all a rigged system. Remember that? Mm-hmm. In the U.S. political system, including the 2016 U.S. presidential elections, defendants posted derogatory information about a number of candidates, and by early to mid-2016, defendants' operations included supporting the presidential campaign of then-candidate Donald J. Trump, Trump campaign, and disparaging Hillary Clinton. Goes on to say that they bought political ads on social media and that they staged political rallies inside the United States, and they were posing as grassroots organizations and entities and U.S. persons without revealing their Russian identities, except for the ones that reached out to me because they were writing in Cyrillic. So, but why is this important? Okay, this is important because Donald Trump covered all this up by denying that it even happened. Donald Trump asked the Russians, Russia, if you're listening, I'd really like to know about the Hillary Clinton emails. Junior was in contact with WikiLeaks and saying that he was willing and loved the idea of receiving the stolen goods from the Russians, and that WikiLeaks acted as the vessel. But this particular indictment doesn't go into any of this. This particular indictment is focused on the Russian conspiracy to support Donald Trump and interfere in the U.S. elections. Now, what's very, very important that you understand is that you don't have to know the people involved in a conspiracy. You don't have to monitor the conspiracy. You don't have to communicate with the conspirators. All you have to do is take some action, any action, to cover up the conspiracy, to deny the conspiracy, or to promote the conspiracy. And Donald Trump has done all three. He has denied the conspiracy repeatedly. He has encouraged the conspiracy by saying, Russia, if you're listening. And he has sought to obstruct an investigation into the conspiracy by telling Lester Holt that the reason why he fired Comey was because of this Russia thing.
I was going to fire Comey. There's no good time to do it, by the way.
Because in your letter you said I accepted their recommendation.
Yeah, well,
you had already made the decision.
I was going to fire regardless of recommendation.
So there was really
He made a recommendation. He's highly respected Very good guy, very smart guy. The Democrats like him, the Republicans like him. He made a recommendation, but regardless of recommendation, I was going to fire Comey, knowing there was no good time to do it. And in fact, when I decided to just do it, I said to myself, I said, you know, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story. It's an excuse by the Democrats for having lost an election that they should have won. And the reason they should have won it is the Electoral College is almost impossible for a Republican to win. Very hard, because you start off at such a disadvantage. So everybody was thinking they should have won the election. This was an excuse for having lost an election.
See, I told you that was kryptonite. I just knew it. The day he said it, I knew that if anybody looked into it, that particular admission would be obstruction of justice. And now we have the underlying crime. We have an indictment. We have a conspiracy. Anyone who worked to hide, encourage, or conceal this conspiracy is a co-conspirator. And Trump did all three of those things. I think Mueller released all this today so that everybody would know that there is a conspiracy, that Trump was covering it up or just, lying about its existence, and that he knew when he fired Comey that he was firing Comey because Comey was conducting a counterintelligence investigation into a Russian conspiracy to help Trump. Trump doubled down and said, Russia never helped me. And Russia, if you're listening, right?
Clear for takeoff. Randi Rhodes Air Force. Air Force. RandiRhodes.com.
Hey everybody, it's Brett from the Randi Rhodes Show. Independent media is the future, and Randi's leading the way. And it's ironic, the more freedom she gained, the more expensive it got. It's crucial now, more than ever, to keep this show pure and free of corporate influence so Randi can tell the hard truths. The first step to change is an unbiased media, and for that, we need your help. So please, go to RandiRhodes.com/support and subscribe, you bastards.
Gobble, gobble. It's time for more turkey. Oh, yeah. All natural turkey jerky from Herky Jerky. That has been a hit ever since they introduced it in late 2017, that turkey jerky, because it's got no nitrates, no artificial ingredients, no MSG, preservatives, and no fat. The turkey jerky is the perfect snack any time of day. And, oh my God, it's absolutely delicious. It's bite-sized pieces of fresh turkey. It's meat that tastes just like the oven-roasted bird that you had on Thanksgiving. It's got just the right amount of everything: salt, smoke, flavoring, and spices. It's unlike anything you've ever had, and they don't skimp. They're going to send you a 14-ounce bag that is going to keep you munching for a long time. Nothing like those wimpy 3-ounce gas station bags. And all this month, $6 off every bag of turkey jerky, and there is no promo code needed. So you get free shipping with 2 bags or more of anything you order in the Herky Jerky store, including Smokies, bacon, beef, buffalo, elk, and venison jerky and sticks. February is the perfect time. Stock up on all the delicious products from Herky Jerky, especially the scrumptious turkey jerky. Order it today at herkyjerky.com.
You're listening to the Progressive Voices Network, and here's a clip from Tara Buster with comedian Tara Devlin from RDTDaily.com.
At this point, the way I'm looking at it, all Republicans are traitors. Okay? If you're in bed with anti-democratic foreign dictators, now allowing people who had a hand in undermining our election, and they're blocked from coming into the United States under sanctions, and you waltz them through the front door of the White House, you're an effing traitor. And if you are an average American idiot who is supporting that, you are also a traitor. Okay, you're a traitor. So I've taken to calling Republicans traitors. They're traitors. What does it take? How many Benghazi hearings did we have? How many times did I have to hear about Hillary's email server? So much so that I wake up screaming in the middle of the night about her private server. That's okay? Could you imagine if Barack Obama waltzed in through the front door of the White House, anybody, pick somebody that right-wingers have a problem with. It's not even a problem. They should have a problem with this. They should have a problem with a anti-democratic dictator pulling the strings of our so-called president. This is Tara Devlin from RDTDaily.com. That was a clip from my show, Tara Buster, recorded live every Saturday evening on the RDT Daily Facebook page and streamed simultaneously on YouTube and Facebook Live. Replayed Sunday, 6 p.m. Eastern on Progressive Voices, or anytime on demand on the Progressive Voices app. Support RDT Daily and the Progressive Voices Network. Remember, we stick together, we win.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
Which is about an underlying crime. And of course, this is major that we have now proof of an underlying crime, but I want to point out that impeachment does not require an underlying crime. There's no evidence that Richard Nixon knew anything about the break-in at the DNC in the Watergate office building. What is known is that he obstructed justice, and we have plenty of evidence of obstruction of justice by Trump and the White House and all his staff. So we don't really need proof of this, but it is definitely better from a prosecution standpoint to have that proof, and now we have it.
Ken Delaney, and I'll turn to you once again here. You're making your way through this indictment here. What does the indictment say in particular here? What does it allege about what a role the Trump campaign may have played in all of this? How much is the Trump campaign invoked in the document that we see before us here in these 37 pages?
I haven't read every word, David, but as far as I can tell, it does not address that crucial question. And I was told by Justice Department officials that any Americans mentioned in this have played an unwitting role in this interference effort. What it does lay out, though, is a very complex conspiracy, and it even shows that, for example, once the Russians realized the FBI were onto them, they started covering their tracks and destroying evidence. And the reason the conspiracy is important, as Jill will know, is that now that there is a conspiracy, any acts in furtherance of the conspiracy can be charged, and that could extend to Americans and people who are not named in this indictment. So it's a very important legal issue here that the government is alleging a massive and complex conspiracy by these Russians to interfere in the 2016 presidential election.
Seth Waxman, let me have you comment on that. I'll bring in Jill Wine-Banks on the heels of that as well. Just pick up on what Ken Delaney just said there about the role of the alleged conspiracy.
Well, yeah, to the fact that there's a conspiracy in place, it's exactly right. Any acts that are in furtherance of that conspiracy can be charged, and anyone that participated in that conspiracy intentionally and knowingly can also be charged. They don't have to participate in every single aspect of that conspiracy. As long as they participated knowingly in some aspect of the conspiracy, they can be brought in. So a conspiracy charge is an incredibly powerful tool for federal prosecutors. And it
is also true that in an indictment, a criminal indictment, and now this is assuming that everyone can get past that the president can be indicted, which I believe is actually the case, and there is a lot of support for that. We chose in Watergate to name the president as an unindicted co-conspirator and to provide a roadmap to Congress for impeachment. But if you indict him, then he only has to participate in any one act in furtherance of any conspiracy, and he is guilty of the entire conspiracy. That is true of every participant in the conspiracy. So you don't have to, as Seth said, you don't have to even know who the other participants are. All you have to do is do one thing in furtherance of it, deliberately doing that.
Russia, if you're listening, we'd like to know where the 30,000 emails. Russia, if you're listening, that was deliberate. That was an invitation to Russia. It also indicated he knew that Russia was acting on his behalf and he wanted more help from them. And now we know even more because we know that Don Jr. was in touch with WikiLeaks, and WikiLeaks was offering dirt on Hillary Clinton. And Jr.'s response to that was, if it's what you say it is, I love it. And a meeting did occur at Trump Tower. And a meeting did occur in order to further the receipt of stolen, hacked Russian conspiracy materials and transferred to the, there was an attempt to transfer those materials to the Trump campaign, to the point where that happened, June 9th? And then Donald Trump gets on the stage and says, on Monday, I'm going to have so much dirt on Hillary Clinton. And the only reason why that press conference where he was going to release the dirt, the stolen goods that he got from this Russian conspiracy of hacking, the only reason why that did not happen is because that day, that Monday, was the Pulse nightclub shooting. We've had some of the worst mass shootings under, this president. It's just, we had Pulse, we've had Las Vegas, now we've had the Parkland School, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. It's just, this man is completely, off his rocker. There's just no question. Anyway, the some of the groups that were retweeted by Kellyanne Conway, that were retweeted by Donald Trump Jr. is a Twitter account, a handle. It's called @10GOP, and it was pretending to be the Tennessee's GOP. It was pretending to be the U.S. state's political party. It was pretending to be the Tennessee GOP, and they had 100,000 online followers. Kellyanne Conway retweeted them. Don Jr. retweeted them. Plenty of people retweeted them in the Trump campaign. I'm so sorry, but there are things that you can. We knew this a long time ago. That story was broken back in October of 2017, and we were collecting stories. And the dossier is right here. This is the dossier printed out on my printer. And what does the dossier say? It says it has evidence of an extensive conspiracy between campaign team and Kremlin, sanctioned at the highest levels, involving Russian diplomatic staff based in the U.S. And this is what this document, proves, that there was a conspiracy that was, based in St. Petersburg, Russia, that was controlled by the Kremlin, that was funded by the Kremlin's chef, which Bill Browder tipped us off to way back when we interviewed Bill Browder. And Bill Browder said, you really need to pay attention to the Kremlin chef. And it turns out that Concord, which is the name of one of his catering companies, was where the money was going for disbursement to these trolls, to these Russian hackers, to this translation team, to the graphic artists that were creating websites like Secure Borders and Blacktivist and all these things. They had every kind of, and so it was, directed by the Kremlin, and it was carried out, by the Kremlin, and it was based in St. Petersburg. It was one of the companies internet services that we knew. They were talking to people in Texas. They were talking to people in New York. They were talking to people in Florida. They were talking to people all over the place. They say that the people that the Russians were speaking to did not know that they were speaking to Russians, but I just, it doesn't matter. What matters is what did the campaign do, and the campaign took a lot of steps. The campaign said, Russia, if you're listening, I'd like to know where the 30,000 emails are. The campaign said Russia is a hoax over and over again. The president said that he fired Comey because of this Russia thing. Then the president had the Russians into the Oval Office without, the proper personnel in the office. He divulged classified information that we got from Israel to the Russians. Obviously, it had to do with Syria. And he also said that Comey was a nut job and that he needed to fire him because the pressure from the Russia investigation was too much for him. And it got rid of the pressure when he fired Comey, he thought. So the president is completely and utterly guilty of being a co-conspirator because he did everything to promote the conspiracy, everything to deny the conspiracy, everything to cover it up.
Russia is fake news. The entire thing has been a witch hunt. Fake news, fabricated deal. Trump and Russia is a made-up story. It's an excuse. You can talk all you want about Russia, which was all a, fake news fabricated deal to try and make up for the loss of the Democrats, and the press plays right into it.
You know which hashtags, this was interesting to me. You know which hashtags were created by the Russians? MAGA. Oh, wow, right? MAGA, yeah. MAGA was created by the Russians. Trump 2016 was created by the Russians. Trump train, created by the Russians. I won't protect Hillary. Didn't really take off. Hillary for prison. And then, of course, you have Flynn with the lock her up stuff, right? You even had March for Trump was created by the Russians. You had Trumpsters United created by the Russians. You had volunteers and supporters of the Trump campaign. I'm reading this from the indictment. Defendants and their co-conspirators also used false U.S. personas to communicate with unwitting members, volunteers, and supporters of the Trump campaign involved in local community outreach, as well as grassroots groups that supported then candidate Trump. These individuals and entities at times distributed the organization's materials through their own accounts via retweets, reposts, and similar means. Defendants and their co-conspirators then monitored the propagation of the content through such participants. This is interesting about minority groups, how the voter suppression effort worked. In or around the latter half of 2016. Oh, and by the way, Idiot Boy, what did he tweet? He said this all happened in 2014? No, it began in 2014. He said, Russia started their anti-U.S. campaign in 2014, long before I announced that I would run for president, and long after you visited Moscow. He said the results of the election were not impacted. The Trump campaign did nothing wrong, no collusion. You are a co-conspirator. You asked Russia for help out loud. You said it was a hoax. How many times? You promoted their idea that our elections are rigged. It's a rigged system. Rigged. And we all wondered if he won, how would he get out of it? He just dropped it. And his MAGA people just don't ask any questions because they have very short memories. But anyway, this is what they did for voter suppression. In or around the latter half of 2016, defendants and their co-conspirators, some known and some unknown to the grand jury, used the organization-controlled personas and began to encourage U.S. minority groups not to vote in the 2016 U.S. presidential election or to vote for a third-party candidate. That pretty much worked. On or about October 16, 2016, defendants and their co-conspirators used the organization-controlled Instagram account, Woke Blacks, to post the following message. Quote, a particular hype and hatred for Trump is misleading the people and forcing blacks to vote Hillary. We cannot resort to the lesser of two devils. Then we surely be better off by not voting at all. On or about November 3rd, 2016, defendants and their co-conspirators purchased an advertisement to promote a post on the organization's controlled Instagram account, Blacktivist. Blacktivist was Russian. It read in part, quote, choose peace and vote for Jill Stein. Trust me, it's not a wasted vote. By in or around early November 2016, defendants and their co-conspirators used the organization-controlled United Muslims of America social media accounts to post anti-voting messages such as, quote, American Muslims are boycotting elections today. Most of the American Muslim voters refuse to vote for Hillary Clinton because she wants to continue the war on Muslims in the Middle East and voted yes for invading Iraq. Starting in or around the summer of 2016, defendants and their co-conspirators also began to promote allegations of voter fraud by the Democratic Party through their fictitious U.S. personas and groups on social media. Defendants and their co-conspirators purchased advertisements on Facebook to further promote the allegations. On or about August 4th, 2016, defendants and their co-conspirators began purchasing advertisements that promoted a post on the organization's controlled Facebook account, Stop AI. The Post alleged that, quote, Hillary Clinton has already committed voter fraud during the Democrat Iowa caucus. On or about August 11, 2016, defendants and their co-conspirators posted allegations of voter fraud were being investigated in North Carolina. That was promoted on the organization's controlled Twitter account at 10GOP. It was retweeted by Junior and Kellyanne Conway. On or about November 2nd, 2016, defendants and their co-conspirators used the same account to post allegations of, quote, hashtag voter fraud by counting tens of thousands of ineligible mail-in Hillary votes being reported in Broward County, Florida. Broward! From at least April 2016 through November 2016, defendants and their co-conspirators, while concealing their Russian identities and organization affiliation through false personas, began to produce, purchase, and post advertisements on U.S. social media and other online sites expressly advocating for the election of then-candidate Trump, expressly opposing Hillary Clinton. Defendants and their co-conspirators did not report their expenditures to the Federal Election Commission or register as foreign agents with the U.S. Department of Justice. Isn't that interesting? Failure to register as foreign agents. And the Federal Election Commission did nothing. Who was at the Federal Election Commission during this time? A name. The pressure of a name. Don McGahn! Now the White House counsel. Then they organized rallies while pretending to be U.S. grassroots activists who were located in the U.S. but unable to meet or participate in person. They instructed some people to build cages and dress up as Hillary Clinton in prison garb, which Americans did. The Russians love you for that. Traitors. There was a Facebook group they created called Being Patriotic. Then there was a Twitter account at March for Trump. They organized 2 political rallies in New York. The first rally was called March for Trump. It was held on June 25th, 2016. The second rally was called Down with Hillary, and it was on July 23rd, 2016 in New York. Florida goes Trump rallies. Russian. After the rallies in Florida, Russian rallies, defendants and their co-conspirators used false personas to organize and coordinate political rallies in New York and Pennsylvania. He was in Pennsylvania. He said, "Anybody? I don't see any Russians here. I didn't see very many Russians here. They were there." And Comey busted them.
To speak to Randi, call now, you bastards. 561-270-3844.
Hello.
The Randi Rhodes Air Force.
Hey guys, it's Scotty, Randi's producer here, and as many of you know, I grew up in Randi's house. You know, eating her food, watching her TV, and like most kids, ignorantly not following her advice. And one of her biggest pieces of advice was never take a job in radio because the big companies that run radio, they suck. Well, I didn't listen and ended up working in radio. And as always, Randi was right. They sucked. But I'm here now and I can tell you that it takes a lot of chutzpah to break away from the big companies and start your own show. But you know what else it takes? Your support. We are independent media, so the only financial backers we have are you, the best listeners in the world. And we can't do it without you. So please go to RandiRhodes.com and support the show, buy a stinking podcast, donate some money, and keep us going.
Whether you're listening to me, Mark Levine, each Monday and Wednesday,
or me, Leslie Marshall, each Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday,
you can hear us 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time on the Progressive Voices Network.
Here's a sample of what you'll hear.
David K. Johnston is our guest. His new book called It's Even Worse Than You Think, What the Trump Administration is Doing to America.
One of
Donald's best skills, and he has lots of skills, is to figure out how to get you to look at and pay attention to something totally unrelated so you're not thinking about what he is concerned you might think about. The team he brought in have loosed what I call political termites into the structure of the government. These termites are busy destroying the capacity of the government to do its work. And they're doing this in every federal agency. He and his administration are there to provide a government of the rich, by the rich, for the rich, and arguably of, by, and for the billionaires.
Let's talk about the destruction from within.
The people that were put in the Department of Environmental Protection, that agency now is turning into, letting polluters run free. So we have a lot fewer deaths and sicknesses in this country because Richard Nixon signed the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act, which contains the word shall. The government shall enforce that law. Well, they're not enforcing it, and they're helping the polluters. Trump's first budget proposed cutting for many disabled veterans their benefits when they get to retirement age from $35,000 a year to $13,000. Now, that's been stopped, but considering that Trump said, I love the veterans, we're going to take care of our veterans, nobody took care of veterans, but I will take care of the veterans. That shows you what a fraud that is. At the Education Department, where the utterly unqualified and incompetent Betsy DeVos, the billionaire heiress from Michigan, was made education secretary, they have to deal with the student loan problem, which is largely people who went to these commercial schools that charge far more than community colleges and give far less education. And her department has taken the side of the bankers against the students because who did she bring in to address the student loan problem? Well, she brought in the predatory lenders. This is not the fox guarding the hen house, Leslie. This is telling the fox, redesign the hen house to make sure that you dine really well on chicken.
And this is somebody who I saw today has completely blocked complaints of all teachers in the public school system nationwide. It's sort of like if you can't make your complaint known to the boss, what good is somebody heading up the United States Department of Education?
They are not there to drain the swamp. They are the swamp monsters.
Again, that's Mark Levine every Monday and Wednesday.
And Leslie Marshall each Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday.
3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time on the Progressive Voices Network.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
A rigged system.
Rigged. To rig the system.
Rig the system.
Totally rigged.
Rigged press.
Totally rigged system. The election's going to be rigged.
We're running against a rigged press. We're running against dishonest people. Okay? Really dishonest people.
I don't even really know where to start on answering this question. Of course the elections will not be rigged. What does that mean?
But that was what Russia wanted him to say. They wanted to sow doubt in the electoral process itself. They wanted to suppress voters. They wanted to suppress minority voters because they were told that Hillary voters are minorities. So they set up Muslim accounts. They said to reach Muslim Americans. They set up accounts for blacktivists to reach African Americans. They set up all kinds of, and then they sent Trump out to say it was a rigged system because they wanted to sow insecurity in our in the electoral system itself. And then, of course. He actually proactively sought Russia's help.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. I think you will probably be rewarded mightily by our press.
Idiot. Oh my God. He was so obvious. It was just it's so believable. The dossier, by the way, is being proven truer and truer each and every day. There are so many things that are, verified now in this dossier. The dossier says that the Republican candidate's campaign manager, Paul Manafort, who was using foreign policy advisor Carter Page and others as intermediaries. The two sides had a mutual interest in defeating Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton, whom President Putin apparently both hated and feared. That turns out to be true. Source E acknowledged that the Russian regime had been behind the recent leak of embarrassing email messages emanating from the DNC. That turned out to be true. That they released it to the WikiLeaks platform, and that the reason for using WikiLeaks was plausible deniability. And the operation had been conducted with the full knowledge and support of Trump and senior members of his campaign team. Well, the last part isn't proven yet, but the first part is, right? And in return, the Trump team had agreed to sideline Russian intervention in Ukraine as a campaign issue and to raise U.S. NATO defense commitments in the Baltics and Eastern Europe to deflect attention away from Ukraine, a priority for Putin, who needed to cauterize the subject. That did happen. The Republicans changed their platform, denied lethal weapons to Ukraine so that they couldn't defend themselves against Russian invasion. And, they did agree to question our NATO allies as to whether or not NATO is still relevant and whether or not they pay their fair share. Source E claimed that the intelligence network being used against Clinton comprised three elements. Firstly, there were agents and facilitators within the Democratic Party structure itself. We don't know that. Secondly, Russian emigres and associated offensive cyber operators. That's true. And thirdly, state-sponsored cyber operatives working in Russia. That's true. All three elements had played an important role to date on the mechanism for rewarding relevant assets based in the U.S. and affecting a two-way flow of intelligence and other useful information. Source E claimed that Russian diplomatic staff in key cities such as New York, that's confirmed, Washington, D.C., it's confirmed in the indictment, and Florida, Miami, Florida, that's confirmed in the indictment, using the emigre pension distribution system as cover. The fact that the pension system was used is not yet proven. The fact that they had contacts in New York, Washington, and Miami is addressed in this indictment. The operation, therefore, depended on key people in the U.S.-Russian emigre community for its success. Tens of thousands of dollars were involved. Actually, it was $1.25 million per month. That's what's in the indictment. Now, Comey was all over this, okay? Comey, my boyfriend, he was all over this because in September of 2017, September 13th, 2017, there was an email that was written by one of the defendants named in this indictment. His name is Kavrazina. He wrote an email to one of his family members. This is a Russian. He said, "We had a slight crisis here at work. The FBI busted our activity, not a joke. So I got preoccupied with covering tracks together with colleagues. I created all these pictures and posts, and the Americans believed that it was written by their people." So the FBI was all over this. All right, let's go to October 24th, 2016. Defendants and their co-conspirators updated an internal organization list of over 100 real United States persons contacted through the organization's false U.S. persona accounts and tracked to monitor recruitment efforts and requests for recruitment. The list included contact information for the U.S. persons, a summary of their political views, and activities they have been asked to perform by the Russians and their co-conspirators, by the defendants and their co-conspirators. On or about August 31st, 2016, defendants and their co-conspirators using a U.S. persona spoke by telephone to a real U.S. person affiliated with a grassroots group in Florida. That individual requested assistance in organizing a rally in Miami. That's where Miami comes into the dossier also. On or about September 9th, 2016, defendants and their co-conspirators sent the group an interstate wire to pay for the materials needed for the Florida rally on September 11th, 2016. On or about August 31st, 2016, defendants and their co-conspirators created and purchased Facebook advertisements for a rally they organized and scheduled for New York on September 11th, 2016. On or about September 9th, 2016, defendants and their co-conspirators, through a false U.S. persona, contacted a real U.S. person who had impersonated Clinton at the West Palm Beach rally. Defendants and their co-conspirators sent that U.S. person money via interstate wire as an inducement to travel from Florida to New York and to dress in costume at another rally they organized. And the costume was Hillary Clinton, in a prison outfit. On or about September 22nd, defendants and their co-conspirators created and purchased Facebook advertisements for a series of rallies they organized in Pennsylvania called Miners for Trump, scheduled October 2nd, 2016. That's all in count one. There are 8 counts in this indictment. You get that there was an underlying crime here. The crime that Donald Trump says is a hoax, the dossier that is garbage and made up.
They've done with this fake dossier, it was made up, and I understand they paid a tremendous amount of money, and Hillary Clinton always denied it. The Democrats always denied it. And now only because it's going to come out in a court case, they said, yes, they did it, they admitted it, and they're embarrassed by it. But I think it's a disgrace. It's just really a very sad commentary on politics in this country. And I have to say, the whole Russian thing is what it's turned out to be. This was the Democrats coming up with an excuse for losing an election. It's an election that's very hard for a Democrat to lose because the Electoral College is set in such a way that it's very hard to lose that election for a Democrat. They lost it. They lost it very badly and very easily. I mean, you look at the votes. It was 306 to what, 223 or something. They lost it by a lot. They didn't know what to say.
He keeps doing this, and this is aiding and abetting the conspiracy. This is, not assigning anybody from his administration to look into this conspiracy. Jeff Sessions obviously lied about his contacts with Russians. Junior lied about his contacts with Russians. Kushner lied about his contacts with Russians, and he lied on his financial disclosure forms. Flynn obviously lied about his contact with Russians and payments he received from Russia. U.S. citizens receive payments from Russia in various states to organize and to travel on behalf of the Russian government, and Mueller's willing to give them the benefit of the doubt, say they didn't know. It doesn't matter. What matters is that Trump helped it. Trump did exactly what Russia wanted done. They wanted to sow discord in the actual electoral process. And Trump went out there and said the whole system is rigged. Rigged.
A rigged system.
Rigged.
To rig the system.
Rig the system.
Totally rigged. Rigged press. Totally rigged system.
Okay? And then he asked for help. And this is really crazy. This is just so disturbing of all the things, okay? Because Trump is the president, but I think we all know who he is. How many people pay attention to our CIA director, Mike Pompeo? Back then, Mike Pompeo, who now is our CIA director, counterintelligence chief, okay? He's supposed to be looking into this crap. When Lou Dobbs asked about the Russia, if you're listening, we really want to find the 30,000 emails, Mike Pompeo covered for Trump and said, oh, it was a joke.
Why all of the nefarious activities of the DNC had been exposed and their emails released by WikiLeaks. Adjudicate this thing for us, would you?
Lou, it's classic Clinton, right? When you find out you got a problem, you deflect, you deny, you create a contretemps where there really is none. Frankly, it's pretty clear who invited the Russians to do damage to America, and it was Hillary Clinton. She put classified information on a private server, inviting the Chinese, the Iranians, the Russians, all to have access to it. I hope they didn't get it, but even the former director of the CIA said he thinks they probably did. So the person who's put American national security at risk isn't Donald Trump, it's Hillary Clinton.
And Donald Trump today, when he said, and I have to say to you, Congressman, I thought it was one of the, forgive me, but I thought it was an extremely humorous, even witty remark on the part of the Republican nominee to say, Russia, if you're listening, if you were to find those 33 missing emails, the national media and indeed the government would appreciate you passing them on. You're a member of the Select Committee on Intelligence, Benghazi Committee. I mean, what's your reaction to it all?
Yeah, I thought Mr. Trump was just joking too. I don't think he truly meant to invite the Russians to come steal American information. We all know that foreign governments can't steal American information. If they do, they'll be prosecuted. I saw Governor Pence say the same thing this afternoon. I think the Democrats are trying to make a big deal out of this because they recognize that with Russia advancing in Ukraine and ISIS destructive all around the world, that they've got an enormous problem.
That's our CIA director currently. It was all a joke. Everything was a joke. Hillary Clinton's the real threat to national security. You have over 100 people working in the White House without security clearances. And Hillary Clinton's email server is what they're focused. This is unbelievable to me. You have a president of the United States who is clearly a co-conspirator with a hostile government. Russia does not have American freedom or the form of government in America at heart. Okay, they're not pro-democracy. They're not pro-free press. They're not they're not pro-Second Amendment, the Russians. And you've got a guy who's doing exactly what they asked him to do.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to make a major announcement today. I would like to promise and pledge to all of my voters and supporters and to all of the people of the United States that I will totally accept the results of this great and historic presidential election if I win. A rigged system. Rigged. To rig the system.
Rig the system.
Totally rigged.
Rigged press.
Totally rigged.
The election's going to be rigged.
We're running against a rigged press. We're running against dishonest people.
That's exactly what they wanted him to do. He did it. Russia, if you're listening, was very proactive also. And then the denials thereafter. And not one order to stop Russia from hacking or meddling in the U.S. election since. Everyone testified this week from the intelligence communities that we are currently still under attack. And Russia has not stopped their behavior. So what Mueller did today was he showed you there was an underlying crime which he didn't even need to do, but it's good that he did. Go to RandiRhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.